Are we live?
We're live. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
Hey, it's Wednesday. Who doesn't love a surprise like this? I'm Susan Moore, the Community Engagement Manager at IIBA.
And I'm Scott Bennett. I'm the Manager of Business Analysis here at the International Institute of Business Analysis. You have us live today, and you just caught us. And we're also celebrating at IIBA our 20-year anniversary. You can see up on the corner that way. We have a logo that's celebrating that. And we have a promotion that we'll tell you about a little bit later in this episode.
That's right. And it's a great one. So if you are thinking about getting certified, or maybe you want to rewrite your certification, this is the promotion for you, and it lasts through the end of the year, December 29th. So stay tuned. We're going to tell you more about that. In the meantime, Scott, I need to ask you to step into my virtual office. We need to talk.
We need to talk.
Mm.
Oh, wow. That doesn't sound good, Susan. But you know what? I've got a guest that's coming on that can help me with that. Why don't you, everyone, please welcome Mindy. Mindy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is great.
Hello. Hey. Well, we just had like a difficult beginning today. So whatevs. Hey, we flow with it, right? Mindy,
Exactly.
it's good to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Why, hi. I'm coming to you live from Arlington, Virginia in the States. And I'm right now an agile analyst, as we like to call ourselves at my company, Excella. And I'm also a Scrum Master. And so it's good I have another 2 analysts helping me on the project, because it's a lot of work, a lot of great work, though. I've been a database developer, a project manager, and I just love being an analyst the best, and Scrum Master, because we focus on the team dynamics more so than a project manager on external dynamics. So that's where I thrive.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you've done a
So the
little
conversation we're going to have today is difficult conversations. So Mindy was a speaker at a conference, BBC, and we got to talk to her afterwards. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I guess when we were thinking about difficult conversations, to me, it always brings up anxiety. Oh, I've got to have this difficult conversation, and nerves come out, all that type of stuff. Why don't we start by saying, by sort of diagnosing, how do you know when you have to have a difficult conversation?
I get nervous. I can feel my stomach start to churn, and I'm like, why is the boss calling me into his office or her office? What did I do wrong? I'm trying to think back to it. Another conversation is, I know I want to get a project done. I'm all about projects, and I have to go to someone who was deemed and appointed to be in a project, and they didn't volunteer. So they're reluctantly coming into this conversation because they didn't choose to do this. So there's so many motivations for a difficult conversation, and you just kind of, when you're getting tense because you're going into something that one of us on the side of the table doesn't really choose to do. Okay. That's my first thought.
And is it a spontaneous thing, or something that you have to sort of think about a lot?
No, you just get thrown into it, in my experience. Yeah, Susan, you're agreeing, right? It just happens. Yeah. Sometimes it's in the middle of a conversation, it suddenly becomes difficult, and I'm like, what just happened? The mood just changed. And I do my best, to fly in the moment, and sometimes it takes pausing and taking a breath to regroup in my head before I carry on and go, establish what just happened.
I think those difficult conversations that come out of nowhere, they come with not just trying to think about what you're going to say, but also sometimes your feelings get a little bit out of control as well, which can also lead you down some paths that are not going to be good for the outcomes of that conversation. So feelings are a real part of difficult conversations because it triggers a lot of reactions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when I think about difficult conversations too, I think about people getting defensive. It's a difficult conversation. I don't think has to be confrontational, which we might naturally think of. It can be a productive conversation, but maybe on a topic that you think might be uncomfortable. Is that a good way to say it?
They start sitting like this, and they start moving their body away, and they're like halfway out the door, but they can't leave yet. And you can tell it's just getting like, they're physically showing that they're reluctant to be there. And it's up to us as the analyst to bring them back to the table, bring them back in the conversation, get their arms done, clenched, and physically and literally, and say, how are we going to deal with this? And empathy, emphasize with no, whatever that word is, with them to get them back with me, with us at the table, trying to do what we have to do ultimately. Yeah.
Yeah, that empathy muscle is something that I think you really need to lean into. It is one of those unsung heroes of what we do as business
Hmm.
analysis professionals. Because I sometimes feel like we think that our difficult conversations, we've got to have a set of technical skills, but because you have no idea sometimes what has triggered this conversation or why they're reacting the way that they are, really empathy is the way that you're going to help the situation, and quite frankly it's the way that you're going to help yourself too, because whatever they're feeling, you mentioned this earlier before we went live today, if they are feeling it or if you're feeling it, they are feeling it too.
Too.
So
Very
Yeah,
true.
yeah,
that's right.
the
So
energy is palpable.
let's get some audience participation here. We are live,
Mhm.
so if you're live with us, you can put comments in. Let's ask our audience, give us some examples of difficult conversations. So we'll get those in the chat, and Susan, you can pop them up if we see them come through.
Okay.
But let's talk about things you should do before having that difficult conversation. So if it's spontaneous, you need to go through that. What are those things in your head you need to think about? Rapid thinking. This is one thing that I
Yeah.
hate doing. It's spontaneous. I preferred planned approaches. But let's talk
Yeah.
about what you need to do before the conversation.
Sometimes we can plan and sometimes we can't. So let's, as they always say, make a plan for any conversation, and then we'll see what happens, and adjust to what happens. So yeah, definitely planning. Is the person there willingly? Am I there willingly? Let's start with that. Are we there trying to fix the problem, to solve the problem? Are we trying to create something new, which is really hard, or are we being forced to do it? That's the first thing I always ask for. Is there external demands on that person that I'm having the conversation with? Are they having other pressures, not from me, hopefully, because I'm trying to plan, but are they having external pressures come in and give them a sense of urgency and stress that will make this a difficult conversation? Where are the stresses coming from? And try to approach it explicitly, acknowledge those stressors, will help identify how the conversation needs to go. That's one of my plans. What about you, Scott?
In terms of preparation, I guess generally what I think about is their perspective, like trying to put myself in their shoes. So if I just take it on the surface, it could easily turn into a blaming conversation. But if I
Mhm.
sort of peel that back, where are they coming from? What's their perspective? What are their concerns? And therefore, how can I approach it in a way that I address their concerns? So it could be a couple different scenarios, right? It could be a VP who's a sponsor of a project.
Mhm.
You're talking to someone higher in the organization. How do I approach that in a respectful way,
Oh, we
but a constructive way? Your objectives are to do this. This is what I'm observing. Or it could be I've got a staff member that's not performing. They're not meeting up the standards. How do I have
Yeah.
that conversation? How do I initiate that? How do I manage it in a way that they're going to be receptive to it,
Hmm.
and not just hear it, but listen to it? So I think that's important as well.
I Manika in the chat said something about root cause analysis. Doing that preparation beforehand, doing the research beforehand, I think is so key. It having ammo, having the information ready to go if it comes up in conversation, knowing the background, our document analysis, our interview analysis that we've done before in any aspect of this definitely helps.
Yeah, I think if you know that you are going into a conversation that could be difficult. And so some of the feedback that we're getting in comments today is like, what would be an example of a difficult conversation? And I know when we were getting ready today, we talked about, difficult conversations don't have to be confrontational. They don't have to be screaming matches. They could simply be somebody making a request of you and you saying, I can't do that,
Can't do it.
and you're feeling bad that you can't do that, right? So it's tapping into some feelings that you might have. Honestly, if I know I am walking into a difficult conversation, the preparation that I can do is more getting myself ready, making sure I've got my facts ready, but also making sure that I have my feelings in check. Like, what am I going to do if I start to feel my chest tightening up, or like I want to run out of the room?
Yeah.
Like, can I do some deep breathing? Can I start it a different way so that they
Mhm.
don't walk in the room and I'm hitting them with the beginnings of this conversation? So I think there are things that you can do if you know that you're walking into it. But what about when that difficult conversation just arises? Like, then what do you do?
Take a yoga breath. I'm telling you, I try to be a quicker thinker. I've tried to stay in the game and say back to them what I thought they asked. Repeating the question gives me time to calm down. But you're literally going, like, letting them know I'm thinking and taking a breath calms me down. That's one of the tricks I've done. It's so key. Yeah, to taking a step and pacing. Like, don't rush. Don't try and minimize it. I think rushing also minimizes things sometimes.
Okay.
So that's just
Yeah.
me. What about you?
That deep breath that you're talking about is more than just a thing to buy time. When you take a deep breath, it is actually, it's not igniting, but it's kind of getting your parasympathetic system, which helps to calm you down. So really take a deep breath. That is really one thing that you can do just to kind of settle yourself down. I think the other thing is to know that you are starting to get reactive. Like, what is that thing for you? Is it your heart beating fast? Is it some other kind of physical thing? Like,
Mhm.
know yourself a little bit, and that can be tough.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think of martial arts when I think about sometimes difficult conversations. If someone's coming aggressively at you, the natural reaction can be to to come back with that same energy. But if you sort of allow that energy to be deflected and calmly react to it, it can really make a difference in the conversation, right? So someone might unknowingly just emotionally be reacting. If
Mhm.
you prevent yourself from reacting the same way, it can really set the tone in terms of you're here to collaborate and
Yeah.
come to a successful conclusion to
And
something.
I gotta say, Christina Lovelock mentioned that sometimes you just gotta do it another time. Sometimes you gotta go, okay, I think we're agreeing to disagree. We're on different pages, and I need to I'll take it on that I need to go do research and come back at and to this conversation. So sometimes we do need just a, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't realize you were of that opinion or that vote, and we got to deal with things. So acknowledging, that might be last resort because I want a decision. As a BA, I want that decision before I leave the room. But sometimes you just got to say, let's take a beat.
Yeah. High
Yeah.
five, Christina.
Yeah. Thank you, Christina.
Yeah, and I think that's important for different personality types. So for myself, I'm not the type of person in a conversation that can come up with a quick comeback, sort of funny jokes, stuff like that. That's just not who I am. I need to think about something. So worst case scenario, I agree. You need to sort of walk away and come back.
Yeah.
But it's sort of, I like what you were saying in terms of rephrasing or repeating what the person's saying to give you that mental space to
Hmm.
figure out, okay, how am I going to approach this?
Yeah.
Because it really is. I'm an introvert, so I think before I speak. I
Hmm.
need that thought processing time.
I call you a methodical thinker
Yeah,
because you're just on your own pace, whereas the fast thinkers are like boom, boom, so.
yeah, and there's also something in personalities too that some people are reflectors, so they need to think about something and reflect on it before they
Ah,
can come back with a meaningful
yeah,
answer.
absolutely.
That's another thing that might be needed.
That's why we send the question to the agenda ahead of time instead of just flashing it in the pan. They gotta, and then maybe if there's a difference of opinion, they can bring it up before the conversation, and we can be all
Yeah,
prepared for it. But so,
yeah,
Ooh, I
yeah.
think we should talk real briefly about
Mhm.
that, because if you've got some things that potentially could lead you down into some difficult conversations, things like an agenda, things
Mhm.
like the questions in advance,
Mhm.
could, if you share that in advance, people can prepare themselves. And in fact, I think one of the comments we got here is, this is from Kitty: rehearsal and preparation before a difficult conversation. If you give people the information they need, one, they can prepare, and maybe they can take it offline before it happens spontaneously, right? So you really do,
Mhm.
honestly, just my opinion, I think things like agendas
Yeah.
and sharing information before the meetings, I think is just a way that we show respect for people, their
Agreed.
time, the work that they do. Sometimes perhaps you can even diffuse difficult conversations because you have shown them that respect. So don't discount sharing agendas in advance.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, Susan. And I'll just build upon that too. Years ago, I was taught by a senior director I reported to that when we first met, the first day we met, I started reporting to her. She said, "One thing is I don't like to be surprised." And so I learned that about leaders is they don't like surprises. So if I see something coming ahead, give them a, a heads up. Hey, this is
Yeah.
coming ahead. I think I got it handled, but just want you to be aware. So
Yeah.
that idea of putting an agenda out there, the topics you want to discuss,
Mhm.
you're not meeting someone and bringing something up brand new for the first time.
Mhm.
They're not going to be surprised. So the conversation should flow better.
There was a time when the client wanted a priority, and just no one on my scrum team thought it was going to be the right thing to do. We're like, no, these other things are way more important, and why are we doing this? And I was like, yeah, team, I tried, I really tried, I couldn't sway them. They're the ones paying our bills, so I'm in consulting, and so if they want this other thing first, we got to do it. And so saying that in the room, like, we don't agree with what's happening here, it's not too bad. There's worse things that could be happening. But acknowledging that maybe we all in the room aren't on happy with the situation, but we got to power through and we got to figure it out. There's more intense conversations that will be had as well. They're like, but this is a light one that shows, yeah, we don't agree, but we got to go forward.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense.
Cool.
So we're just going to take a short commercial break here. Let's tell people about this promo that we've got going on at IIBA. I'll throw this image up here. So we've got 20% off every exam. So we've got 7 different certifications. And Susan, you were reading through this. It's not just exams, it's also retakes, right?
That's right. So if you have been waiting for the time to retake your exam, that 20% off is on the rewrite fee as well. That is in the form of a rebate. So between the beginning of November and December 29th, if you sign up for any of these exams and take them in that time, then you'll get 20% back. Yeah. So it's
Hey,
a good promo. Now, back to the conversation.
So let's talk about, we talked a little bit about preparation. Let's talk about managing the conversation itself. So we're in the conversation now. We're talking to that person or multiple people.
yeah.
What are those type of things that we should do to help make sure that that conversation flows and get to that productive outcome we're looking for?
Okay. All right. So one is the empathy thing again, right? Say, I hear you, active listening skills. I hear you. You're not happy with this decision. Let's call it that. And acknowledge that in the room. Acknowledge what the other person is saying as well. So the suggestion in the room is to do A. You're suggesting B. These are both interesting. I don't know if it's an improv moment or something, but I read somewhere that there is something valid about everybody's point of view, right? You got to validate that they have a good point of view for a moment. It might be something different that someone else is thinking of for a different moment, and we got to get that surfaced. That we might be thinking with different assumptions in different contexts. Let's find out what those are, try and surface those things, and then acknowledge that one part that could be useful in the bigger solution. Try and find some grain of something to salvage, but then say, okay, we got to make a conclusion. And how can we, right, it's very important, how can we come together to make this important? Right? It's not about you. It's not about me. It's not about that other person. But we as a group, because nothing is done by ourselves, we as a group have to come to this solution. And so bringing them in, they're saying, I don't want to deal with this. And I'm like, okay, how can we deal with this better? Bring yourself into it. Lean forward, even if you're in the room or you're, somewhere there, and show them physically and verbally that you're in it with them. That helps a
Yeah,
lot.
That's
that's a
great.
that's a good point. Gosh, we have there was a lot of conversation in our comments today about this. Before we move on, though, that improv method is yes and that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the yes and.
Okay.
So when somebody says something, rather than saying no or disagreeing,
Right.
just yes and
Mm-hmm.
then you can, give your whatever your piece is. That yes and I think also lets people know, and you have to do it with authenticity, but it lets people know that you've heard them. And many times, I'm thinking about a couple of situations I've been in where I came into the conversation and delivered news which I had no particular feeling about. Like, I didn't know that it was going to generate the reaction that it did. And so what I got back was quite different. And what I realized is that I just needed to let that person know, I hear you. I didn't have a response because I didn't expect it, but simply saying, I I see, I hear what you're saying. Sometimes just the acknowledgement can take it down a level. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say we've gone through the conversation, we've had the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
What should we do after the conversation? Is it just basically you have the conversation and it's done, or is there something you should do to follow up?
Yeah. Remember that 5 paragraph essay we learned in high school? Tell me what I'm going to talk about it, and then tell me what you talked about. We're going to tell you what we talked about. Okay. And so,
Okay.
especially if it's a difficult conversation, I'm sorry, we got to do a little CYA, maybe some people call it, and some people just call it sharing of the affirmations and the confirmations of what we talked about. Whatever mood you need, but you got to make sure we all agreed on these things. Maybe here are some points that we got to think about and not, and think about for later. But these are things we rolled in scope and out of scope so that everyone's on the same page, because it's going to come up again from someone else, maybe, that it's not a unique point of view that someone was saying, but so let's get it recorded that this was a decision, because I don't want to do this again.
Okay, so for our global audience that might not be familiar with the CYA firm, I'm not
Oh,
going to say it out loud.
cover your butt.
Essentially documenting the conversation, sort of playing it back in a way that you've got an email as evidence that
Hmm.
this was the conversation, this is what we agreed upon.
Yeah.
So if it comes up 3 months later, hey guys, here's the evidence. Is that what you mean
And
by the CYA?
yeah, a little CYA. And also just saying thank you, everyone, for their time and their effort. Like, we know we had to sit in that meeting and have that conversation, but acknowledging that this was a little rougher than normal, just saying it out loud gives people permission to go, yeah, that was intense.
Okay.
And we
Hmm.
got through it. And we're going to do it again some other day, and it'll be okay because we did it this time. It'll be fine. So,
Ooh, that's really important, is
mhm.
the how do we recover from the difficult conversation? And I think all of what we're talking about right here are ways that show thanks to everybody for being willing to go there, as they say. Also acknowledging this was hard. You guys really stuck with it. Thank you. Because it's important, I think, for teams to know and to see we have difficult conversations, we can come out of them still intact, and we're okay. This is
Mhm.
okay. And I do think making sure that you share notes or summaries or whatever following that difficult conversation, it is not only to make sure that you've covered all of your bases, but also that what you guys think you decided is in fact what you decided. Because how
Yeah.
many times have you then gotten together and somebody said that is not what happened,
Yeah.
right? But summarizing it can make sure that if you need to get back together quickly,
Yeah.
to resolve anything, that you do. That is part of that trust equation that we always talk about here, right? That is, if somebody doesn't have evidence that we were credible and reliable, that can hurt our ability to be trustworthy.
Credible and reliable. I love that.
Hmm.
I want to be
Hmm.
that.
Yeah. So
Definitely.
so that is more than just note taking. is
Yeah.
really, I think, the suggestion there.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, listen, we have a ton of comments. How about
Wow.
we just go through some of these really
Yeah.
quickly? And I'm just going to take them in the order that I have them because everybody has a great point today. All right. So here is the first one in the list. This is from Prasanna, a conversation. And I think Prasanna is giving an example of a difficult conversation. So this is a coworker complained to my manager directly about me not meeting expectation. Worst thing, he didn't say a word multiple times. That is the worst, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you know that somebody has complained about you, but they are not being forthcoming
That is so
in
hard.
one-on-one conversations with you.
And you got to work with them again, many
Hmm.
times again. Like this is a thing, but they don't have the, what is that courage that,
Hmm.
I forget the first word, but the courage to say it. And so it's up to us. I think it's up to us to try, right? And if you need a third party in the room, bring it, but try and go with your most open, kind of stance to go to them and say, and not fall on the sword a little bit, but acknowledge that, okay, I might have a difficult personality sometimes, or I come in a little stressed. Take some responsibility for part of that two-way conversation that needs to happen and say, what can I do to make you feel more open to talking during a meeting, and do it privately. Obviously, I don't know if I need to say that, but have a private
Yeah.
conversation. Don't acknowledge, don't tell anyone else you're doing it or that you did it, but just say, I want to be a better business partner for you. What would help what makes you comfortable generally in a conversation that would help you be more open? Because if you're more open, we'll have better solutions. Like what would you guys do? I mean,
Yeah,
oof.
no, I think that's a good point in terms of communicating that, you know what, I would prefer that we have this conversation first, so I have the opportunity to fix and adjust instead of you going to a leader and escalating it, right?
See, that's
So,
already bygones. That's already done. So calling that other person out is like slapping their hand.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Like
okay.
don't try to say try on your own to say, I feel like we've had difficulty communicating in our conversations. Try
Hmm.
to bring in the notes from the boss, but try not to acknowledge that.
Okay.
It's
Good advice.
okay. Susan? Yeah.
I think about, okay, so I tend to lean more towards the social side of things. I sometimes do that just to ease the mood a little bit. By the way, the humor can be okay. It can also go horribly wrong. I've got a story about that as well.
Oh.
But yeah, I got called out by an attorney. It's a story for a different broadcast. Anyway, but typically what I would do is, because I think I have had an experience like this, and I just made it sound very conversational. Hey, Mindy, I have really been wanting to get some time with you. Do you think we can just catch up, maybe get coffee or something like that?
Yeah.
And then when we get together, maybe we start off with a little social interaction.
Hmm.
And then I lead into, gosh, it's really important to me to be the best business partner I can be to you. And I feel like sometimes I haven't always met those expectations.
Oh, wow.
Help me understand, like, what are the things that I could be doing to make sure that we are working together well on this project?
Yeah.
Then it's really me. It's like I am coming to you looking
Yeah.
for help and advice. When I my feeling is when you approach that person in that way, right?
Mhm.
You're asking them their advice. And people really like when you ask for advice and they tend to be more
Sure.
talkative. So that's maybe one way.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
it.
Is that okay,
Okay.
Scott? All right. So as a scrum master, I have learned so much being a scrum master. Every once in a while we want to check in and see how we're doing. And so Susan, that's the epitome of that. And as a BA, we can do that. In our work, we can do that. I can say at the end of a requirements facilitation, a conversation with a client, the business team, or an either IT team, I'm just going to go, hey, I just want to check in. How did this go for you? were we prepared enough? What could we do to make this go better if it feels a little awkward? Kind of do that retrospective check-in. 2 minutes. 2 minutes, that's all I'm saying. With anybody we have a conversation with. Now I'm getting off track on what we were talking about.
That's okay. No,
Okay.
I think because you know what? I think
All
the
right.
values that we look for in great scrum masters, I think are good
Mhm.
examples of what we're talking about here.
Cool beans.
It is about checking judgment at the door, checking ego at the door, even though you may know that team members are like, "What are you guys doing? Like, what? We didn't talk about this, right?" You got to leave
Yeah.
all that at the door because ultimately what you want people to do is to take responsibility for themselves,
Yeah.
and be able to say, I'm probably not doing the right thing here, Mindy. I'm kind of looking for some coaching here.
Mm.
Right?
Right
Right?
on.
Because
Right on.
then it can get you into a much better conversation rather than Mindy going, "Susan, you have not completed these JIRA tickets. What the heck are you working on? You're not showing up to stand-ups." Like, please.
Oh,
That's a
help me
hard
understand
conversation.
you. Help me help you. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Jerry Maguire. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. So let's see. So let's keep working on so let's keep going through these comments again. I'm just going to give them to you as they've come in. So this LinkedIn user said maybe instead of difficult conversations we call them required conversations. I think that's good, right? Because some of
Mhm.
these we really need to work through it. So
Mhm.
thank you for that. Then we have Brenda has a note. Difficult
So much.
conversations come down to respect, right? I think it's a great point. If we feel like the other person does not respect us, it will go badly.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, snaps on that.
Yep. Here's here's a good one. Another LinkedIn user focusing on the objective. And
Get
maybe
back to
even
the objective.
and maybe even focusing on the outcome that you
Yeah.
want as well.
So it's very easy for difficult conversations to tangent. So I like that point of getting back to the focus. All right, remember what our goal is. Remember why we're doing whatever we're doing this month, even, and let's focus on how this conversation can get us closer to that goal and the objective of this conversation, how it gets to that.
Yep.
Cool.
All right. So then we got a note here from Ashish
Ooh.
using visual data charts to understand facts.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think if there are facts bringing something in,
Yep.
I would also say we could maybe lean too heavily on data and facts if it's a more emotional conversation.
Yeah, I think this comes back into the beginning of the conversation where we said planning.
Mm-hmm.
Plan for different ideas to be brought up, have different ideas of what was brought up before and evidence that goes toward the goal, the objectives of the conversation. And the data charts are part of that. Anything that would help that conversation, planning.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when it is facts that are
Mhm.
are going to be key to that.
Yeah.
So Lavanya suggests understanding the audience before meeting.
Yeah.
I
The
think,
diversity. Yeah.
yeah, understanding your audience, I think, is just in general a great tip for any kind of communication that you do.
And let's extend that even. And then we have our stakeholders. We always talk about stakeholders and our relationship to them. And we think about who's in the room and think about who they're representing of the people not in the room.
Hmm.
And the background of I'm trying to this, political, we just voted yesterday, the constituency that's not in the room with me that I'm representing. and so the diversity of the users, the help desk that doesn't always get to seat a seat at the table, the other IT teams that we rely on, but they don't get a seat at the table all the time. So yeah, that as well.
Yeah, and the word diversity in there also cued something for me too. In Canada, the workplaces I've worked in very culturally diverse,
Yes.
and sometimes the culture can be part of communication. And we've talked
Hmm.
about this a few times before, Susan, about communication and how you get different cultural norms.
Love
Hmm.
it.
And we work in a global organization. So sometimes if I were to word something one way, it could be taken offensively but with someone in a different culture, it would not be. So I think that the cultural sensitivity
Yeah.
is also really important.
Back in the day, I've been speaking at conferences and meetups and whatnot for a very long time. It's just I love the interaction that it gives me in the learning session. And I did a presentation on multicultural teams,
Okay.
project teams, and then it fed into working remotely and how we kind of manage both of those things together. And I remember I was working with someone from India who had been in the States for like 6 months, not a very long time. And I was just casually at the water cooler talking about something. And I said, I forget what I said, but it was something like apple of my eye, right? Some remote folklore metaphor that in the States we get, but someone from India. And I was, after a minute fully had gone by in the conversation, I stopped and went, did that make sense to you what I said? And he said, no idea what you're talking about. And I was like, okay, I got to be more mindful to have more friendly colloquialisms, more better metaphors that, and explaining them as well, because I don't want to leave anyone out of the conversation.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
We use metaphors a lot in conversation, I find, and I agree. You got to step back from that, make sure you're using clear language.
Good times.
All right. So let's see, maybe a couple more here. So Jen Bedell, I think you know Jen. Delivering bad news is definitely a difficult conversation. So she was responding to looking for some examples. I do think I think it is part of our job is
Mm-hmm.
delivering bad news.
Sometimes it can be just matter of fact. Like we make more
Mhm.
of a deal out of it than it is. Is it really, really bad news, or is it just like disappointing news? Like, let's put it in context and try not to make a bigger deal out of it than it is. I've never had to fire anyone, so that's not a thing. But I've had to tell someone that they're not
Uh-huh.
coming up to expectations, and then saying, "How can I help you help the team deliver better?" Like, how can I support as a coach, and deliver, help prep you up so that you can do better in your job. That's I guess that's hard.
I think that's a good point about let's have some perspective on um, what we consider bad news. I can
Mhm.
think about a million years ago when I was working on a project, and we would have meetings where we would talk about what was going to be in the next iteration. And sometimes it was a two-way street. Sometimes I would have to tell the team we're not going to do this, and sometimes they would have to tell me they're not going to do that. But
Yeah.
that can feel like bad news for some people.
Hmm.
But I think it is inherent upon us as very often the person that is working with all of these different teams, like we need to build the relationships with all of these people so that it is just a conversation. We
It's
don't have time in this sprint to do this,
it's
and
not
that's it.
personal. This sometimes it's just not personal. It's just a fact of life. And Samir talks about do it quickly, and I think we talked about that as well earlier. But it's just don't wait on it. If it's bad news, it is what it is. Just get it over with. Figure out how to move forward and deal with it. Yeah, how bad is it, and do it quickly.
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's see what else. What else do we have? All right, I'm going to keep going down this list. Here's a note from Connor. How important is the timing of having these types of conversations? I think this is a good question.
That is a good question.
Scott, you
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
some ideas on that?
Yeah, yeah. I think timing is really important. It's sort of like when you reward people, it
Yeah.
needs to be in a timely manner.
Yeah.
When you have a difficult conversation, the more you put it off, the bigger it can become.
Agreed.
So being able to address it as soon as you can, but
Mm-hmm.
it's balancing dealing with it quickly versus dealing with it in a way you're prepared for
Yeah.
a successful outcome.
Agree completely. And also, who's in the room when we're doing it? Does it need to be just one-on-one? Does it need to be the development team? Who else needs to be there? Get it done as quickly as can. Don't wait on anyone to at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
I I also think that leaving too much time in between, you know, when you know that you need to have the conversation and you have it, it can lead to a whole lot of feelings, a whole lot of tension, a whole lot of rumor, myth, and suspicion occurring,
Mm-hmm.
which could just make things worse.
All the
So,
rumors,
yes.
all the. I'm gonna think it's way worse than it really is. My
Oh, yeah.
mind imagination goes way worse. But don't wait on me.
Let's see. And then maybe we'll finish with Christina's thought here. It might be difficult in the short term, but
Yeah,
kinder in the long term. I
we're
think that is
just
a great point to remember.
we
Yeah.
want to be kind. We're doing our best. Every human is doing their best. To if we're in, are we ending it? Then um, that's a great thought to end on because it's like be nice. We're just doing our best. We're all struggling with something. It's a complicated world out here. So do it faster. Do it as matter of fact. It's usually not personal. It's just how life is and work is right now. Something good will come along soon if it's not this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just ripping that Band-Aid off,
Yeah.
right?
Just,
Just do it.
just
Well, Mindy, this has been a wonderful conversation. There's been lots of chat there. So if you're watching this as a recording on LinkedIn, you can see that chat.
okay.
You can also, if you're not seeing this live, you can see it on YouTube and also on podcast on your favorite podcast platform. So, Mindy, your voice is going to be going all over the place.
Nice.
So,
All
thank you
right.
for sharing your experience, your expertise, your advice. It's been very wonderful, and I'm sure our audience is going to enjoy it as well.
So great speaking to you today. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been fantastic. And really, thanks to everybody that's been participating online in this conversation. It's been
Yeah.
great feedback. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not
Thanks, Mindy.
difficult at all today.
And I'll pass it over to you, Susan.
All right. Well, we want to thank you all for joining us today. And in 2 weeks, we have got another great topic coming up. We're going to be talking about launching your business analysis career. Um, Maybe that's something that you're thinking about doing or you are doing now. Well, we've got a speaker on who will talk a little bit more about how you can launch your career. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and we'll leave another one right here for you to help you in your business analysis career. If you haven't subscribed to the IIBA YouTube channel yet, you can click over here and click on the bell icon to get notified every time we publish a brand new video.